Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. And I am going to be reading from Reverend Wurmbrand, Richard Wurmbrand, his book, The Answer to the Atheist Handbook. And I'm in chapter, it doesn't have a number by it, but it has a title, The Origin of Religion. That's this one. Now, this book let me just give you a little background again. It's that in 1945, when the communists seized Romania and attempted to control the churches for their purposes, Richard Wurmbrand immediately began an effective, vigorous underground ministry to his enslaved people as well as the invading Russian soldiers. He was arrested in 1948 along with his wife Sabina. His wife was a slave laborer for 3 years on the Dubé Canal. Richard Wurmbrand spent 3 years in solitary confinement, seeing no one but his communist torturers. He was then transferred to a group cell where the torture continued for 5 more years. So he's basically imprisoned for 8 years. And wow. And so there was an attempt by the government, obviously, by the communists when they came into Romania to control the church and to literally seize the church from doing what the church does. And that's when arrest came to be. So this is a real relevant book for our day and age too to read, and deals with obviously the Atheist Handbook, which was a socialistic Marxist book that was written in 1961 by Moscow's Academy of Science, and that was a political science published book. So this book was reprinted many times and translated into many different countries. And so this is kind of his rebuttal to that, the Atheist Handbook from 51. I think it was. Let me make sure though, right? 1961, sorry. So the origin of religion. Religion is not inherent to man. It is not an inalienable quality of human nature. Our honored opponents say that science has proved this. The archaeological discoveries have shown that during hundreds and thousands of years, man did not have any religion. I am not a member of the Academy of Science. In my ignorance, I have believed that archaeology could discover only things which existed in the past, not things which did not exist. It's a good statement. So he says, I'm not a member of the Academy of Science. In my ignorance, I have believed that archaeology could discover only things which existed in the past, not things which did not exist. But there is no joking with academics. They have a powerful argument. Caves have been discovered in which lived the... these are some words, man. They have a powerful argument. Caves that have been discovered in which lived the Pithecanthropus and the Sinanthropus, the ancestors of modern man. Pithecanthropus and Sinanthropus, the ancestors of modern man. So basically what he says is, no joking aside, no joking with the academics, they have a powerful argument. Caves have been discovered in which ancient man, supposedly the ancestors of modern man, were found. There were plenty of stone tools and bones of eaten animals. Quote, but never have excavations from that time shown the least sign of some religious representation, even the most elementary existing at that time, unquote. This reminds me of a story. An Italian debated with a Jew. You Jews are so proud. There is tremendous propaganda claiming that you are the most intelligent people in the world. Sheer nonsense. In Italy, excavations have been made, and in some strata of the earth, at least 2,000 years old, wire has been found, which proves that our Roman ancestors at the time already had the telegraph. The Jew answered, quote, in Israel, excavations have been made in parts of the earth 4,000 years old, and nothing has been found. which means that we had the wireless before you had the telegraph, unquote. Ha ha. What if the absence of any religious relics in the shelters of the earliest men was an indication that they had a spiritual form of religion without outward signs of cult? A religion consisting of meditation, contemplation, and worship in the truth. Let us be honest, comrades, academics. He says, but to continue the argument, my opponents have to explain how it happened that at a certain moment man became religious. They say that religion appeared in the time of Neanderthal man for two reasons. First, primitive man's fear of death, coupled with the fear that deceased members of the tribe would come out of their graves and harm the living. Second, primitive man's impotence in the face of the elements of nature. Now, Pithecanthropus, I think I'm getting that better now, Pithecanthropus was more primitive than the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. He was more impotent than the latter two, so logically he should have been more religious. I appeal to common sense. My opponents are academics, for some of them historians, and some of them historians. What do they hold about the origin of the Russian people and state? Well, they orient themselves to the oldest written documents of our history. Then this produce must hold good also in the sphere of the origin of mankind. The oldest documents of mankind are the Maneva Dharma Sastra, the Gilgamesh epic, the Vedas, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Book of Moses, and so on. They are unanimous in saying that we were created by a heavenly being, who disclosed to prophets of old the essential truths that different religions have in common. This would be the origin of religion. If I am wrong in accepting the oldest written documents of mankind, authors of the Atheist Handbook are wrong in their history of Russia. On no continent is there any cuneiform tablet, any inscription carved on tables, or any reminiscence that man originated from the ape. Men usually know something about their grandfathers. If men of old had sufficient fancy to invent a sophisticated religion, why did they not remember seeing their grandfathers swinging from trees by their tails? Again, let us be serious, academics. Religion comes from God. It is communion with God. The most primitive man knows I exist, quote, and, quote, in many objects around me, that many objects around me exist, unquote. But if I and my fellow men and the things about us exist, there must exist one more thing, existence itself. If I am and the world is, there is also the simple fact of being. I get old, fellow men die, warning me that my turn will come while my children grow up. All objects which surround me decay or wither away, but the simple fact of being never ceases. There exists a pure being independent of our coming and going. I have not always existed. The things around me have not always been. Primitive men perhaps could not put this in so many words, but they knew about a supreme immortal being, the one whose name will be revealed later as the God whose name is, quote, I am. Belief in him and the desire to propitiate him have inspired every religion in its beginning. This is the basis of every religion even now. If this is not true, why was your book written? And he's talking, I think, about the Atheist Handbook. The Russian farmer was once asked by an atheistic lecturer if he believed in God. He answered affirmatively. He was asked again, why should you believe in him? Did you see him? No, was the reply, but neither have I seen a Japanese. Notwithstanding, I believe that Japanese exist. Our army fought against them in the last war. This is proof enough for me. If there were no God, why do you still fight against him? Why do the atheists write 700 pages against a non-existent person? The Atheist Handbook also belongs to the category of being and proposes an eternal being. So that is the origin of religion right there. And now he writes in his next chapter, which is pretty short too, on the origin of Christianity. So I'll tie it in with this one. The Atheist Handbook begins by complimenting us Christians. It says, at least in the initial period of its existence, Christianity not only renounced the offerings of sacrifices, but likewise also all kinds of ritual. F. Ingalls asserted that this was a revolutionary step, differing from other religions of antiquity. Christianity refused categorically all ethic delimitations in matters of faith. Its sermons having been addressed to all tribes, all peoples. In problems of creed, Christianity has categorically refused also the social barriers. Those who propagated the teachings of Jesus spoke to all men, without differences of ethnic origin or social position. It is not true that the first Christians renounced the offering of sacrifices. True, they abolished the animal sacrifices, but they gladly sacrificed themselves. In any case, for once our opponents say good words about us. No national or racial discrimination within Christianity, and this already 2,000 years ago. In Poland and in the Soviet Union, where there was discrimination against the Jews. In Russia, all the Tatars, the Chechen, the Ingush, the Kalmyks, the Balkar, the Volga German people were deported for no other guilt than belonging to a certain nationality. In communist China, the Tibetans were oppressed. In these countries, the first question was asked, what is your social origin? Woe to you if your father happened to possess a factory. There were no social barriers in Christianity as Christ taught it. It asserts the Greek, Roman, and Jewish authors of the first century give us absolutely no information about Christianity. Notice the nice word absolutely. This denial is absolutely false. Okay, so that was just really quick, right, on the origin of Christianity. It ended with that statement, or this really interesting paragraph. It asserts, he's saying, I forgot. The Atheist Handbook does not compliment us further. It asserts, quote, the Greek, Roman, and Jewish authors of the first century gave us absolutely no information about Christianity, unquote. Notice the word absolutely. And it says this denial is absolutely false. Okay, Roman authors about Christianity. So now we're going to get into Pliny the Younger, people of that nature. Probably maybe Tacitus, I don't know. Yep, we're going to get into Tacitus a little bit. And so we'll get into some of that, and we can get into that now. The Roman historian Tacitus lived around the year AD 60 to 120, referring to the burning of Rome, which happened in AD 64. He writes, all the endeavors of men, all the emperor's largesty, and the propitiations of the gods did not suffice to allay the scandal or banish the belief that the fire had been ordered. And so, to get rid of this rumor, Nero set up the culprits and punished with the utmost refinement of cruelty a class hated for their abominations, who are commonly called Christians. Christus, from whom their name is derived, was executed at the hands of the procurator Pontius Pilate in the reign of Tiberius. Checked for the moment, this pernicious superstition broke out, not only in Judea, the source of the evil, but even in Rome, that receptacle for everything that is sordid and degrading from every quarter of the globe, which there finds a following. Accordingly, arrests were made of those who confessed to being Christians. Then, on their evidence, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much on the charge of arson as because of hatred of the human race. Besides being put to death, they were made to serve as objects of amusement. They were clad in the hides of beasts and torn to dogs by death. Others were crucified. Others set on fire to serve to illuminate the night when daylight failed. Nero had thrown open his grounds for the display and was putting on a show in the circus, when he mingled with the people in the dress of the charioteer or drove about in his chariot. All this gave rise to a feeling of pity even towards men whose guilt merited the most exemplary punishment, for it was felt that they were being destroyed not for the public good, but to gratify the cruelty of an individual. That's in the Annals 15 or 25 maybe of the historian Tacitus. So the absolute of the Atheist Handbook is not absolute from the last chapter. We have one Roman historian of the first century witnessing to the existence of Christ. We can serve our opponents with a second, Suetonius, AD 75 through 160. He writes in Vita Claudii, that's 24, 4. It says, since the Jews were continually making disturbances at the instigation of Christus, he, Claudius, expelled them from Rome. So again, the existence of Christ is ascertained, yea more, under the Emperor Claudius. This Christ already had a multitude of disciples in Rome. In the year AD 64, they were already fiercely persecuted, as the same author describes in Vita Neronis 16. In his, Nero's reign, many abuses were severely punished and repressed, and as many new laws instituted, punishment was inflicted on the Christians. Let me repeat that. As many new laws instituted, punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a sect of men adhering to a novel and mischievous superstition. There follows a third Roman historian, Pliny the Younger, from AD 62 to 113. He writes to the Emperor Trajan, It is my rule, sire, to refer to you in the matters where I am uncertain. For who can better direct my hesitation or instruct my ignorance? I was never present at any trial of Christians. Therefore I do not know what are the customary penalties or investigations, and what limits are observed. I have hesitated a great deal on the question whether there should be any distinction of ages, whether the weak should have the same treatment as the utmost or the most robust, whether those who recant should be pardoned, or whether a man who has never been a Christian should gain nothing by ceasing to be such, whether the name itself, even in innocent of crime, should be published, or only the crimes attaching to the name. Meanwhile, this is the course that I have adopted in the case of those brought before me as Christians. I ask them if they are Christians. If they admit it, I repeat the question a second and third time, threatening capital punishment. If they persist, I sentence them to death. We can serve our opponents with a fourth document. We possess the letter of St. Clement, Bishop of Rome, dating from immediately after the Neronian persecution or after that of Domitian. It was from the 1st century and contains plenty of information about Christianity. From it we know the state of the church in Corinth at the time. It tells us that the Apostle Peter died as a martyr, that Paul had been in prison 7 times. We get the names of other martyrs, the Danaids and Dirce. St. Clement, writing in the 1st century, knows Christ as a historically as a historical reality. He writes, Christ is of those who are humble-minded and not of those who exalt themselves over his flock. Our Lord Jesus Christ, the scepter of majesty of God, did not come in the pomp of pride or arrogance, although he might have done so, but in a lowly condition, as the Holy Spirit had declared regarding him. A passage of Sulpicius Severus, a Christian writer of the 4th century, has also been critically examined and is judged to have been based upon an extract from the lost writings of Tacitus. It tells us about a council of war held by Titus after the capture of Jerusalem in AD 70. Titus is reported to have expressed the view that the Temple of Jerusalem ought to have been destroyed so that the religion of the Jews and of the Christians might be more completely extirpated, or just wiped out, I think that means. The Christians had arisen from among the Jews, and when the root was torn up, the stem would easily be destroyed. And in AD 125, Christian philosopher Aristides presented to the Emperor Hadrian a full codex of the moral principles of the Church, which must have been old already in order to have so elaborate a system of thinking. I quote from it: "Those who oppress them, the Christians, they exhort with the word to make them their friends. They do good to their enemies. Their wives, O king, are pure as virgins, and their daughters are modest. Their men abstain from all unlawful sexual contact and from impurity in the hope of recompense that is to come in another world. As for their bondmen and bondwomen and their children, if there are any, they persuade them to become Christians, and when they have done so, they call them brethren without distinction. They refuse to worship strange gods, and they go their way in all humility and cheerfulness. Falsehood is not found among them. They love one another, their widows' needs are not ignored, and they rescue the orphan from the person who dares him violence. He who has gives to him who has not, ungrudgingly and without boasting. When the Christians find a stranger, they bring him into their homes and rejoice over him. When a baby is born to one of them, they praise God. If it dies in infancy, they thank God the more, as for one who has passed through the world without sins. But if one of them died in his iniquity or in his sins, they grieve bitterly and sorrow over the one who is about to meet his doom. Such, O king, is the commandment given to the Christians, and such is their conduct. As men who know God, they ask from him requests which are proper for him to give and for them to receive, and because they acknowledge the goodness of God towards them. Lo! Exclamation. On their account there flows forth the beauty that is in the world. The good which they do not shout in the ears of the multitude, that people may notice, but they conceal their giving as a man conceals a treasure. They strive to be righteous as those who expect to be bold, to behold the face of their Messiah, and to receive from him the promises. Truly this people is a new people, and there is something divine mingled in the midst of them." Let me repeat that. Truly this people is a new people. There is something divine mingled in the midst of them. Take their writing and read them. You will find that I have not put forth these things on my own authority. These things I have read in their writings, I firmly believe, not only about the present, but about the things to come. There is no doubt in my mind that the earth stands today by reason of the intercession of Christians. Their teaching is the gateway of light. Let those approach then who do not know God, and let them receive incorruptible words which are from all time and eternity. that they may escape from the dread judgment which through Jesus the Messiah is to come upon the whole human race. So that was in 125 AD by the Christian philosopher Aristides. And he presented that to Herodian, a full codex. Okay, what has remained of the assertion that the first century gives us absolutely no information about Christianity? Question mark. But I did not need to argue that this is not true, that there are absolutely no documents about Christianity dating from the first century. The academics, authors of the Atheist Handbook, contradict themselves on succeeding pages. They say that the book of Revelation is dated AD 68, so we are in the first century. A Jew wrote it, and he begins by telling about an already existing and organized Christianity, even in places far away from Palestine. The Revelation begins with 7 letters to the churches of Asia. So basically what he's saying is that the Atheistic Handbook, right, said that there was no first century things we can know about the churches, but they also forget that they also say that the book of Revelation is dated 68, and it has at the beginning of it, it's written to the churches in Asia Minor, meaning that in the first century you already had churches set up in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. So he's just pointing out contradictions. So, okay, the next chapter is the witness of the Gospels, and I'll pick that one up next week, and we will keep reading the answer to the Atheistic Handbook by Richard Wurmbrand, who is the founder of the Voice of the Martyrs. If you are into equal rights and justice, and I know a lot of you are nowadays, right? Not just from listening to Peter Tosh, hopefully, right? Right? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but what? No one wants to die. That's right. But hopefully, you check out the Voice of the Martyrs too, and you'll get more on equal rights and justice around the world as well. So hope you guys have a great day and enjoy it, okay? And hope you enjoy the book. So bye-bye.